Good evening and welcome. You're watching Newsbreak with me, Sanket Upadhyay. Cutting away from what you've been seeing on your screens right now, the political battle in Karnataka, the battle here in New Delhi between the Congress and the BJP is something very, very significant that we would like to highlight right now. The state of the states as far as justice delivery in this country is concerned. A crucial report has now been published. It's called the India Justice Report, and a very important question is being asked: is justice being delivered in Indian states? What are the key findings of this report? It is an annual feature. There have been on the previous 2 occasions where this annual report has been presented. This is the 3rd installation. What does this report say? Let's talk about them one by one. So on your screen right now, we first talk about key finding number 1. This report says that 8% of women officers are there in police nationally, which means that in the Indian policing system, the representation of women police officers is only 8%. 8. And at this pace, a state like Jharkhand will take 206 years to have 33% women personnel. So the representation of women is increasing, but at this rate in a state like Jharkhand, 206 years, imagine. Key finding number 2. 77% of the people who are in jail are awaiting completion of trials, which means they're under trials. An alarmingly high number, 77%. Key finding number 3, and this I found particularly shocking. 187 square kilometers is the average area which is being served by one police station in this country. Of course, it's an average. You would have greater density in, say, for instance, Delhi, where your access to the police will be more, access to the police station will be more. And then there are places like Rajasthan, far-flung areas in Chhattisgarh and other areas where the average of all of this in the country is 187 square kilometers, which is being covered by, on an average, one police station. Key finding number 4, as far as the state human rights commissions are concerned, a study of 25 SHRCs, 33,312 cases have been found pending over here. Key finding number 5, only Sikkim has reported full judge roster at the High Court, which means that the full roster is not complete in many states. Only Chandigarh will report full judge roster at the district court level. And key finding number 6, 44% average vacancy across 25 state human rights commissions in 2020-2021. The Punjab State Human Rights Commission reported 94% vacancy in the year 2020-2021. So when there are pendencies, when there are cases which are being delayed, which the Human Rights Commission is not being able to hear at the state level, one such reason is the fact that there are alarmingly high number of vacancies in these human rights commissions. So it is very, very clear that these are issues that need to be addressed. The numbers tell us something. And to talk about this in greater detail, we have with us the Executive Director of the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative and also the author of this India Justice Report, Ms. Maja Daruwalla. Thank you very much for joining us. My first question to you, Ms. Daruwalla, the India Justice Report 2022, would you like to tell us some of the key highlights according to you? Some we've already mentioned.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I'm really delighted that this report is out now in 2022. The key highlights, I think, are 2 things. One is the changes in ranks, which have been quite surprising and different in the sense that you see Karnataka, which was 14th last time and is now 1st. And you see the southern states, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, doing much better than other states, Andhra, Kerala doing well, and Gujarat, for instance, doing consistently better from 1st to the 3rd report. So this is good news. The middle states, the middle ranking states have sort of made little changes but stay in the middle. But sadly, the 3 or 4 states that were in the lowest ranking earlier remain in the lowest ranking. And this is worrisome because almost 45 crore people, or 450 million people, live in those states, and they are deserving of better justice delivery. So that is definitely one of the highlights of the report.
Go through some of the key findings one by one, Ms. Daruwalla. Number one, there is a finding in this report that there are only 8% women officers in the police nationally. Is this increased, decreased?
You know, it's not particularly helpful to be talking about a single state, right? Because each state has got its own particularity.
Like Jharkhand.
But on the other hand, yes, there is very much merit in talking about why there are not already many, many more women in policing, or for that matter in the judiciary, or in the legal aid, or in the prison services. This is something to do with a consistent institutional bias which there is in the justice delivery system, which should absolutely not be there, because a singular specific about a justice system anywhere in the world, especially in a democratic country, is that it must demonstrate equality and equity. So the question to be asked is, why, in fact, is there so much institutional bias that it's taken all these years to even get to 10% in the police? If I may elaborate a little bit, in the judiciary, you have in many states up to 35% women in the subordinate judiciary. Now this is a good thing, but then you come to the high court and you see there are only 13%. Again, that is telling you something, that is signaling something about why women can't go further up and break this glass ceiling. Now, you can always make excuses like women get married, women have babies, women leave the career, but you can't, the women are not going to stop having babies or be biologically different. You have to take that into account, and you have to ask why the institution is not molding itself to the women rather than expecting women to be men.
I think that's an important
point. This is what we talk about when we talk about institutional bias. I don't think there is enough conversation in the public about what institutional bias actually breaks down to. It may be inherent, it may be unconscious, but it is there, and the figures tell you that story.
That's a very important point, Ms. Daruwalla, that you're mentioning, and I would want to ask you, in the past, because the India Justice Report has presented its report on 2 occasions, beyond these figures, has the report also highlighted steps on how this report can be used to exact some change? Any suggestions?
It would not be fair of me not to mention that the inclusion of women over the last 10 years, the pace of inclusion has increased.
Okay, that's nice.
It's increased because there is a larger catchment area. There is also a much greater consciousness within the public, and there is also pressure from many groups that women should be included. You know, it's become something that is kind of become something that you cannot excuse. You can't defend it so easily, that there are no women, and therefore it has become an important factor. The same thing goes, if I may say so, for caste. Now, there have been caste quotas for years, decades, but caste quotas are not fulfilled in any state except in Karnataka in the police, where scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and OBCs have been included. That quota has been fulfilled in one state, in one subsystem. That too has to be explained and changed.
Correct. Correct. So a lot of recommendations that you have made, a lot of findings and deficits that you have found, for instance, as far as this judiciary is concerned, Now this report, Ms. Daruwalla, also talks about 77% of the people in jail waiting completion of trials.
It is extremely alarming, and it has to be tackled. You can't really justify 77%, and 77% is up from 68%. So it's an upward graph. And the time that they are spending in jail is also increasing. And this is a cumulative effect of too many arrests. The Supreme Court has clearly said that arrest is supposed to be a last resort thing. Do your investigations, make sure that there is a probability rather than the possibility of a crime having been committed, take it to the magistrate, then the magistrate has got a discretion at remand stage. They don't use that discretion as much as they should. Time does not permit it, shortages of staff do not permit it, but that shortage of staff, that lack of willingness to look at deeply into whether or not there was at all the possibility of a crime being committed or all the signals of a crime have been committed, should not fall on the person in front of you. That is the duty of the magistrate. Then it gets into the jail system. Then these people are of the poorest socioeconomic backgrounds, semi-literate, not literate, migrant, don't have roots in the society, and they are asked to fulfill impossible conditions for them to get out on bail. Now, there are a great many people out on bail. There is no doubt about that. If you look at the arrests, there are a great many people out on bail. But 77% of them being in jail, that is a symptom of how much representation they are getting. What kind of representation are they getting? Are they getting quality representation? Are they getting representation at an early time? Do they have to wait for representation to such an extent that they go to the private person, the private lawyer, and then beggar themselves getting out of jail? You know, there's a great deal of tragedy which the statistics cannot capture.
That's true.
Because of the dysfunctions of the system.
That's true. But then they can definitely give us an indication, and that indication seems to be, you seem to be addressing that point, Ms. Daruwalla. Now, the report also says that there is one police station for every 187 square kilometers of area. So this is a huge problem. How do you ensure justice is delivered or people reach the doorstep for justice?
You know, there are benchmarks in the theory, right? There are benchmarks, but let me elaborate just a little bit. You asked what the ideal was. The ideal should be that any person, wherever they are living, should be able to reach a policeman or reach the safety and security apparatus in an equal way, whether they're living in a high-rise, whether they're living in a jhuggi-jhopri, whether they're living in a remote desert somewhere. That is the ideal. That in different countries is serviced in a different way. The usual explanation given by the establishment is that it's a function of money and it's a function of having people enough to be available. Naturally, the concentrations of police are much more in the urban areas. But now you look at Kerala, the topography of Kerala and the distribution of the population is such that there is very little difference between rural and urban policing. But if you look at a place like Rajasthan, which has large desert areas, the topography doesn't lend itself to this. I am told, or I am given the explanation that now communications, everybody having a smartphone or a phone, basic phone, at least can get to a police station through the phone or through some means of communication. But the truth is that they can't. A woman in trouble in Barmer is going to not have the same kind of ability to get response as a woman in central Jaipur. And this is the problem. And this is a problem that requires a solution. Technology can only do a certain amount. The fact that the police to population ratio is low, that also adds a dimension to this. So what I'm trying to say is I can't give you an instant solution or an answer, but I can certainly point to what needs to be solved. If you look at it only in terms of what can my institution do, you will not get to the answer. But if you look at how can I solve the problem of the last mile, then you may get to an answer. And this was Gandhiji's refrain throughout, that your institutions must be able to serve the last mile.
Exactly. Exactly, Ms. Daruwalla, and this brings me to my final question. And since you have been talking about institutions and institutional delivery, my final question is that this report also talks about the condition at the State Human Rights Commissions, SHRCs. The study says that across 25 states, they have a pendency of 33,000 plus cases. Now, in your assessment, has this increased, decreased? And also, do you think that this is a result of politicization maybe of these institutions? What explains this?
Given the statistics that we have seen about state human rights commissions, their vacancies, the lack of women, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of executive posts, the paucity of investigative staff, the lack of awareness in the public of what they can do, and perhaps the disappointment of the public about what they can do. I think that the 33% is bound to grow. It is my feeling. Since I work only on statistics, I cannot give you analysis beyond that at the moment.
Sure.
I don't want to be impressionistic, but my feeling is that these institutions were set up, but they are so poorly resourced that I don't think that they can do justice to their mandates.
Exactly, and certainly not solve the last mile problem, as you mentioned. Thank you very much, Ms. Maja Daruwalla, for joining us. Thank you. It's an eye-opener, this study. Thank you. Stopping for a short break at this moment. We'll be back with a lot more news and updates on the other side.